Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History for this month's episode of What We're Into. And as you can see, if you look at my friend Slim back here, we are kind of into Halloween. Now, those of you who are regular viewers of the UFH will have noticed that I haven't dropped a video in about 3 weeks. This is because it's been my midterm period. Lots of midterm exams to give, lots of midterm papers to grade, and this episode of What We're Into is really dropping late because I wanted to include some Halloween stuff. I'm not doing a Halloween special this year, I just don't have the time, but I did one last year and the year before, so if you want to check those out, just search Halloween on the video page of the UFH and they'll come up. Anyway, the first thing Halloween related that I want to show you is this. A couple of nights ago, Annabelle's school had their Halloween ball, and brace yourselves. How cool is this? Annabelle went full steampunk and she was totally in character. Here's a close-up. I did her hair and makeup, and I have to admit I am quite proud of my styling talents here. Anyway, she was actually the best dressed girl at the ball. Everybody loved her costume and she was in her element. Doesn't she look great? And sticking with Halloween, I'm really into these zombie yard flamingos. I don't generally like zombies. I tend to shun movies with a zombie storyline. I feel the same way about vampires. However, I do like these flamingos. I think they're very chic. You can buy zombie flamingos for your yard, but I think a lot of people paint regular pink flamingos in these ghoulish zombie-like colours. I think this is very creepy, ghoulish and groovy, don't you? Let's look at some fashion. Do you remember in last month's What We're Into, we cast a little glance at the summer 2020 collections? We did London and New York, but Paris and Milan hadn't dropped. And so let's just take a little look now. There wasn't anything that spectacular or that great, but what I loved were the colours. Let's look at them. Elie Saab, Givenchy, Alexander McQueen, Vuitton and Dior. These beautiful pastels, so pretty, mauve and light corals and pinks and lavenders. I loved the palette in these collections. What do you think? What else are we into? Did you read about this? In LA, if you order Burger King from Uber Eats, guess what? The Burger King will come to your door with your Whoppers. I think this would be potentially terrifying, but I think it's kind of cool as well. Much better than Ronald McDonald showing up. That really would be terrifying. Well, I am really into this. Hipster Mickey. It's a new type of Mickey that Disney are creating. There are the Mickey ears, and that's a little pin. Hipster Mickey with his glasses, his beanie, his Starbucks, and his cell phone, and of course the obligatory headphones and satchel round the shoulders. And Minnie there on the right is also getting her hipster on. Isn't it weird how hipster attire has really become a fashion trope in its own right, hasn't it? What else are we into? Well, sticking with Disney, I'm really into the sound of this new restaurant that's going to open next year, I believe. It's called Space 2020. There isn't much concept art out there. This is at Disney World. I think it's at Epcot. But the idea is that you are dining in an atmosphere that feels exactly like outer space, with stars and planets and astronauts floating around. And look at this, you can look down and see planet Earth as you have a cocktail, presumably. I think you'd probably need one. This seems a little bit creepy to me, but also very cool. We're hoping to go to Disney World next year, and I will definitely be checking this out and reporting back. What else are we into? Well, I thought this was an interesting story that broke this month. These skeletons are known as the Lovers of Medina. They're Roman, and they date from about the 5th century, and as you can see, they are holding hands, which is why they are called the Lovers of Medina, and everybody assumed it was a man and a lady. And here you can see they are holding hands. Anyway, because of new DNA testing that they can do on skeletons, it transpires that these two skeletons belonged to men. These are two men. Now, of course, we'd love to think that these were two male lovers who were buried together. And of course, homosexuality wasn't particularly frowned upon in ancient Rome. Evidently, it was fine for a patrician to have a male lover. However, it's very doubtful that they would be buried together holding hands, and Roman historians say it's far more likely that these two lads were brothers. And I say lads because they were only in their late teens or early 20s, I believe. Two brothers, maybe like this, and historians think that they probably died in battle together. So, lovers or brothers, it's still a beautiful gesture and one that we don't really associate with ancient Rome. That was such an alpha male society, wasn't it? But this is very touching, and it actually put a little lump in my throat when I read this story. Sticking with history. Oh my, I love this story. It just broke yesterday. This piece of medieval art was found hanging in an old lady's kitchen in France. She says she can't remember where she got it. She's had it for years, and she just assumed it was a little religious icon, the kind of thing that you'd pick up at a gift shop at Notre Dame or something. However, she moved into an old people's home, and her belongings from her house went to auction. And this little icon here, it's called Christ Mocked, sold at auction for $33 million. $33 million. Why? Because it's by Cimabue, the late medieval, early Renaissance Italian master. Evidently, it's in very good condition, apart from having a lot of grease and cooking grime on it, because it was actually hanging above her stove. She didn't know, but oh, I love this kind of story. Also, always loved Cimabue. Why didn't I find this? What else are we into? So the next thing I'm into has a rather strange backstory. It was inspired by an episode of Doctor Who. Now, just as with zombies and vampires, I've never really been a big fan of Doctor Who, but my husband got me to watch an episode where Doctor Who goes back to the 30s and meets Agatha Christie. It's very cool and fun, and in one of the scenes, there was a gold wallpaper that we both fell in love with, and we found something similar on the internet, and I bought it for my husband for his birthday for our accent wall. Here it is, gold with black swans and hot pink water lilies. Isn't it gorgeous? When we found this wallpaper, which is by the designer Nina Campbell, I admit I did sort of gulp. I gulped when I saw the price. You can only do an accent wall with this wallpaper, otherwise he will go bankrupt. But it looks so lovely, doesn't it, against our Joan Crawford feud blue walls. So we got the paper, a very nice gentleman put it up for us, and when I sat back and looked at these swans, they suddenly reminded me of something. Does this swan in particular remind you of anything? Why, of course, the iconic photograph of the Loch Ness Monster. And let me tell you, once you see Nessie on your wallpaper, you cannot unsee Nessie on your wallpaper. I want to go around and put tam o' shanters on all of them. But hey, that's not a bad thing. You know how much I love my cryptozoology, so I am proud to have swans that look like the Loch Ness Monster on my walls. Well, I have to stick with the house to talk about the next thing we're into. I am so into the incredibly lucky week I had on the auction sites this month. You know, on eBay and Etsy and Kijiji, you can go months and months without finding anything you like. Gold struck for me this month, literally. I picked up this credenza for $250. Beautiful mid-century modern original. The handles and the jetting were not gold. When we bought it, we removed all of that. I spray painted everything gold. You know how much I love my gold spray paint. And Annabelle put everything back together again. If that wasn't good enough, the very next day I found this pair of Hollywood Regency lamps with their original lampshades in gold and marble for the pair, $80. And there is a close-up. I've lived in this house for about 18 months, I guess, and when I moved in, my husband and I decided to really redecorate and really make it our own. I don't have any before pictures that don't feature George. That's the only before picture I have, and you can see it was very sort of clean and quite modern and minimal, and I think this is quite a transformation, and I'm quite proud of the work we've done and all the hunting around we did to find all of this great stuff. So the living room, I am officially declaring it finished, and I think Joan would be proud. What else am I into? Order, order, order in the court. All rise for Barbie's latest incarnation in the career Barbie range. Judge Barbie. She comes in varying forms. You can buy them all, have the Supreme Court if you like. But what I think is really fun is how they've given her that kind of Judge Judy crocheted collar. And she, of course, comes with a hammer. Believe me, if Judge Barbie had been around when I was a little girl, there would have been no mercy. Everything would have been a hanging offence. I was a terribly judgmental and strict child. But sticking with Barbie, I know you've all heard this news. Mattel have just introduced the world's first non-binary doll. It's part of a series called Creatable World, and you can create your own characters again and again. The set comes with hairpieces and wigs and a sort of hip androgynous wardrobe, and I think this is extremely cool, but I think it's also kind of brave of Mattel because, sadly, as we all know, not everybody is as supportive of the trans, non-binary, LGBTQ communities as we are. So, good for Mattel. And just so I can segue into the next thing I'm into, in the career line, Mattel have just brought out Marine Biologist Barbie, and as soon as I saw this, it of course reminded me of George Costanza, and when he has to pretend he's a marine biologist, and this segues me perfectly into what I am watching this month. I am rewatching all of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It seemed that the past 4 weeks have been full of nothing but Larry David moments for me, and so I'm really getting some comfort watching poor Larry David struggling through the modern world. Yep, it's pretty good. What else are we into? Well, this next one comes to me courtesy of Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group member Joan. Hi, Joan, who alerted me to this fabulous little video on YouTube by Vox, which discusses the history of the peacock chair and why it appeared on so many album covers. It also appeared in a lot of people's homes. Do you have one? Did your parents have one? Mine did, and there's me, age about 4, sitting in my parents' peacock chairs. I'm probably about to go condemn all of my dolls. I was a very strict and judgmental child. Anyway, go to YouTube and just type in peacock chair Vox and the video will come up. It's so interesting. Thanks for that tip, Joan. What else are we into? Ooh, I'm really into the big costume exhibition at London's V&A that will open in February. Kimono, Kyoto to Catwalk. I love kimonos. And evidently the exhibition will include an awful lot of beautiful antique kimonos, but then show how kimonos and kimono tailoring has been applied to fashion, like here with this gorgeous mustard yellow Paul Poiret gown. I would love to go and see this exhibition. Maybe it'll tour and open at the Met or something. I'd love it. What else are we into? Well, this month I'm really interested in the Spanish Civil War. I went through a Spanish Civil War phase in the 90s, and my interest has been piqued again because I saw this book in the bargain bucket of our local bookstore, No Pasaran, Writings from the Spanish Civil War. It's so good, and what's really interesting about it is that most collections of writings from the Spanish Civil War are by English or American writers. Very few include Spanish writers, ironically. And so these are articles, letters, essays from both sides of the Spanish Civil War, but you do get a bit of George Orwell in there too. So my interest in the Spanish Civil War bled effortlessly into something else I suddenly got into this month. Ernest Hemingway. I've become obsessed with Ernest Hemingway, not reading his novels. I read quite a bit of Hemingway in my 20s, and I'm not quite ready to revisit it yet, although I will always go back to The Movable Feast, which is sort of Hemingway light. Anyway, I went down this Hemingway wormhole last week, watched about 5 massive documentaries on the man, as well as all of the biops and filmic depictions. I don't love everything about Ernest Hemingway. The big game hunting, I don't like that, and I don't understand how he could go and shoot a lion, for example, and yet he so obviously loved his cats. But let me ask you this, an interesting thought. Hemingway, he was really one of those alpha male he-men, wasn't he? The outdoors, the drinking, the smoking, the cats. Not really in keeping with the alpha male, but still, I always say, any boy can love his dog, it takes a man to love a cat. But my question to you is this, do you think the alpha male, the he-man, has disappeared? Because this trope, this character, really was such a big part of the 20th century cultural landscape. Anyway, thinking about this question got me back into Orson Welles. Now, I love everything about Orson Welles. Again, he was one of those alpha males, one of these he-men, but perhaps a little more sensitive to other people than Ernest Hemingway sometimes was, evidently. So I have been watching Orson Welles' interviews on Cavett. Orson is so delightful and charming and such a wonderful raconteur and such a lovely man. All of the Dick Cavett stuff is on YouTube, and watching Orson Welles on it got me into watching The Cavett Show in general. Another observation, wow, weren't talk show guests interesting and eccentric and wonderful? So different from today, when a celebrity will go on and maybe it's the fault of the hosts who don't really draw much out of them. Dick Cavett was never the star of the Dick Cavett Show. His guests were the stars of his show. I think today the talk show hosts, even though I really enjoy them, it's very much about them and how they interact with their guests. Rupert and I were discussing this, and we thought there really only is one truly eccentric celebrity today who's great on talk shows. Nicolas Cage. You can always count on Nick Cage to give a fabulous, funny, charming interview, right? Eccentricity. It's disappeared. What do you think? Let me know. Am I eccentric? I think I'm eccentric. I don't think it goes down well. Well, I know I'm not alone in being really into the fact that Netflix has finally set a release date for Season 3 of The Crown, November 17th, and you can be absolutely sure that I'll be reporting back on that in next month's What We're Into. They also have a trailer which looks great. Of course, it's a change in cast now. Oscar winner Olivia Colman is playing Queen Elizabeth, but I'm really excited about seeing Helena Bonham Carter as Princess Margaret. I think it's a role she was born to play. I'll tell you somebody else who I think was born to play a role. Renee Zellweger as Judy Garland. Now listen, I didn't love this movie. It was more like a made-for-TV movie. It didn't really move. Although it moved me, at least Renee Zellweger's performance did. It was a little bit distracting at first because she's nothing like Judy Garland. And yet she did not an imitation, but an interpretation, which I thought was very spectacular and very moving, and I am sure she'll get an Oscar nod. Of course, the movie takes place in the final months of Judy's life, later Judy, and in fact, there's a UFH episode in our 20th Century Style Icon series about this classic Judy era of her life and how she created a really unique look for herself. Anyway, if you haven't seen Judy, I'm not going to say, oh, rush to the movie house to see it, but when it comes on TV and you can stream it, definitely watch it. Renee Zellweger is remarkable. Tell you who else is remarkable? Annabelle, yes. It's time for What Annabelle's Into, and brace yourselves, it's a good one. I'll be back afterwards with the food of the month, the cocktail of the month, and of course the designer of the month.
Good morning or good night or good afternoon. Whenever you're watching this, hello. Let's continue, shall we? The first thing I'm into this month is The Masked Singer. We watch it on Hulu, and my favorite character is this lavender rose. And the second thing I'm into this month is Halloween. And we sprayed 6 golden pumpkins this Halloween to go in our front yard. They look beautiful, as you can see, shining in the sunlight. And we sprayed them gold, firstly, because Mimi and my dad love the color gold. And the second reason is so squirrels wouldn't eat them. But, as you found out, this little squirrel, this naughty little squirrel, literally was eating one of the pumpkins on the side and then just grabbed it and ran. And went to the other side of the street. But he's looking very bling, I must say. Or she. Fabulous. Just fabulous, darling. The third thing I'm into this month is cats. And I think it's really cool. And Django's sort of a rum-tum tugger. Like, you know. And my favorite characters are the Mungo Jerry and Rumple Teaser. And the Gumby cat always gets stuck in my head. So if you hear me saying that, don't worry. And I'm going to go see Cats, the movie, in Palm Springs at Christmas time with Francisco and Davy. Thank you, everybody, and have a happy Halloween! And by the way, don't forget to check our Facebook group, like this video and subscribe, and on the Facebook group, comment of what you're being for Halloween. Bye, my fellow humans. You know you always gotta add that. But, bye! Bye!
We're going back to the 80s for the food of the month because I seem to be having a very 80s moment right now. I'm watching the American Horror Story Anthology 1984. A couple of weeks ago, I did that massive History in Color episode on the 1980s. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote a chapter for a book that's coming out about 1980s fashion. I was concerned with the workout trend, and so all of this came together to inspire me to cook chicken marbella. Do you remember how popular this was in the 1980s? That is my chicken marbella. That looks so professional, doesn't it? It was delicious, and of course, the recipe originally came from that quintessential 80s cookbook, the Silver Palette Cookbook. It's been reissued a million times. It's still out there. I'm not going to give you the recipe for chicken marbella, just Google it. It's everywhere. I will say this though, most recipes say to team it with rice. I teamed it with couscous, and instead of chopped basil on the top, I used chopped cilantro, and it gave it sort of an exotic vibe. Anyway, I love it. And the cocktail of the month? Well, of course, it's Halloween. It's the Red Zombie. Basically 3 different kinds of rum with blood orange liqueur. Like this one here, Salerno. It's the most famous one. Now listen, I have to admit to you, I have not tried this cocktail. Why? Because, of course, we can't get blood orange liqueur where I live right now. However, I am going to San Francisco next week on some fashion history business, and I will be bringing a bottle of Salerno back. And the designer of the month? Of course, it's Edith Head. Edith was an October baby. Oh my goodness, Edith Head crops up so much on the Ultimate Fashion History. Of course she does. White Christmas, Double Indemnity, Blue Hawaii. There's even Edith Head's famous chicken and potatoes quesadilla. Such a remarkable designer and such a remarkable person. So happy birthday, Edith Head. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of What We're Into here on the Ultimate Fashion History. I'll be back very soon with more episodes, so just click that little circle to subscribe, and if you want to comment, visit us on Facebook. Bye for now, and have a great Halloween.